A poor cleaning lady turned out to be very smart in business management with her hidden notes. What the wealthy CEO did next surprised everyone. Before we start, please tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. At the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy it. Julia Bennett was cleaning the CEO's office, humming along to a catchy song on her phone. She spun around with a cloth in her hands, swayed a bit, and giggled to herself. If someone saw this, I'd probably get fired, or maybe even praised, she thought. She was so into the music that she didn't hear the elevator arrive, but she did hear footsteps approaching. Julia stopped suddenly, her eyes wide. "Oh no, not now," she whispered, turning down her phone's volume and looking at the door. When she saw the man in the hallway, her heart raced. Thomas Fisher, the CEO, the boss, and the man known for his fancy ties. Julia dropped her broom, stumbled over her bucket, and nearly fell. "This must be a nightmare," she whispered, breathing fast. In a quick move, she dove under the desk, just as Thomas walked in, not noticing anything unusual. He set his briefcase on the desk and pressed a button on the phone. "I need an update now," he said firmly. A voice replied from the other end. "Redwood canceled the contract and so did Orion. 2 cancellations in 2 weeks. This ruins our quarterly results. Investors are getting anxious." Thomas leaned back in his chair, staying quiet for a moment. Julia crouched under the desk, trying not to laugh or breathe too loud. She couldn't believe she was hearing this. "One more loss and we have nothing left," he murmured. "We must act quickly." Thomas ended the call, tossed his phone onto the desk, and rubbed his face with his hands. He looked tired and worried. He then walked to the window and stood there silently for a few seconds. Finally, he said quietly, "If I go down, I'll go down alone." He picked up his briefcase and left the room, closing the door behind him. Julia remained under the desk, frozen. "Congratulations, Julia. You nearly had a heart attack and now you're an unexpected spy." She slowly stood up, still trying to understand what had just happened. The CEO of Fisher Corp., the most respected man in the company, was struggling, and no one knew. She glanced at the papers on the desk, filled with numbers and contracts. She didn't understand everything, but it was clear the company was in trouble. On a whim, she left the office, went to reception, grabbed a notepad and a blue pen, then returned and sat in the CEO's chair. Taking a deep breath, she thought, "You've really lost it, Julia." In neat writing, she wrote, "Cut losses by renegotiating the contract with the Southern Branch. Use Clause 13B to stagger delivery over 120 days, saving 18% and giving time to manage finances." At the end, she wrote, "Sometimes the answer comes from unexpected places." She folded the paper and placed it under the monitor. Then she stood up, arranged the chair, grabbed her bucket, and walked out like nothing had happened. But deep down, she knew she had crossed a line. The next morning, Thomas came to the office early, looking very tired. He left his jacket on the chair, turned on the computer, and noticed the folded note on the desk. Curious, he picked it up and read it, frowning as he took it in. The clause mentioned was real. Though rarely used, it could definitely help. He called Priscilla. "Did anyone come in here last night?" She checked the records. "Just the cleaning crew. No one else, sir." Thomas went back to his desk, still holding the notes. He sat down slowly and stared at the paper. There was no name, no clues, just an answer. And for the first time in weeks, he felt something he thought he had lost. Hope. The next day, Thomas couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious note. Every employee in the hallway became a suspect. He studied the handwriting, searched for clues, and even asked Priscilla to look at the access logs again. "Are you sure only the cleaning crew was here?" he asked again. "Absolutely, Mr. Fisher. The system records all access cards. Only authorized staff entered the building after 10 p.m. Thomas shook his head, feeling frustrated. He followed the suggestion from the note, and surprisingly, the renegotiation with the Southern Branch went well. The savings were real and the cash flow was already improving. Whoever wrote that note knew business very well. Julie arrived for work, feeling nervous. She couldn't stop thinking about her idea. It felt crazy, but she was proud that her suggestion worked. "You seem different today," said Sophie, her best friend and co-worker. while they organized cleaning supplies. More cheerful. "Don't be silly," Julia said, but she couldn't hide her smile. When she got to Thomas' office, he wasn't there. Julia continued working, but couldn't help glancing at the papers on his desk. She noticed reports showing the numbers improving after her suggestion. Her idea had saved a lot of money. Her heart raced. If one simple suggestion had such a big impact, maybe she could help even more. Julia remembered a plot from a show where the main character saved her father's company by diversifying investments. She picked up another sheet of paper and wrote, "Consider partnerships with sustainable technology companies. The green market grows 23% a year. Pfizer Corp could lead this sector before others catch on." She left the note in the same place and slipped out, feeling like she was on a secret mission. The next morning, Thomas found the second note and became even more interested. The reference to the show was unusual, but the idea about sustainable technology made sense. He looked up the episode and found that a similar story existed. "Priscilla, I need a list of all employees with knowledge in management or economics," he said firmly. "That includes everyone, and I want to know who has access to the confidential financial reports." In the following week, Thomas received 3 more notes, each one more detailed than the last, always with references to Latin American soap operas and effective strategies. The third note suggested a marketing campaign inspired by a show where the main company used storytelling to connect with customers. The fourth idea involved reorganizing departments based on another program. All the strategies worked. In 2 weeks, Pfizer Corp not only recovered but also exceeded its goals. Thomas was eager to find out who his mysterious consultant was. "She knows our numbers better than some directors," he muttered, reading the latest note. Then he had a great idea. "A senior consultant position," he said, and Priscilla raised her eyebrows as he explained the job ad. Exactly, salary, above market, exceptional benefits. He wanted to attract the best talent in the city, but inside, he was thinking of one special person. The job ad was posted on all the main job sites and in newspapers. Thomas was confident his secret advisor wouldn't turn down the chance. All he could do now was wait. 3 weeks later, Fisher Corp held a celebration for their great quarterly results. The event took place on the top floor, which had been made into a ballroom with a view of the city. Julia and the cleaning staff were asked to work during the event, helping out. She wore her best uniform and tried to blend in with the fancy guests. The party was lively when Julia heard a conversation that made her uneasy. "He thinks he's clever, but he won't last long in charge," said a sharp female voice. Julia hid behind a decorated column and saw a well-dressed blonde woman speaking with a man in an expensive suit. "Victoria, are you sure you want to do this?" the man asked, looking uncomfortable. "Absolutely, David. Thomas embarrassed me by ending our engagement in front of everyone." "Now it's my turn to embarrass him," Victoria replied, her eyes full of determination. "I messed up the Redwood and Orion contracts weeks ago. That was just the beginning." Julia gasped. Victoria was behind the company's early troubles, and now David asked, "Now ill hit him where it hurts the most. I have secret information about Fisher Corp's upcoming projects. Ill sell it to the competition and watch his company fall apart." Victoria smiled coldly. "He'll lose everything just like I lost my reputation." "That's corporate crime, Victoria." "It's justice," she said. "Next week when they launch the new sustainable product line, Titanium Corp will already have the same thing out there. Thomas will look like a cheap copycat." Julia felt dizzy. She had to warn Thomas. But how? She couldn't just walk in and say she had overheard something private. Victoria continued, "David, you'll break into the system on Friday and give me access to the Green Future Project files. I have a contact at Titanium who will pay well for this information. Don't forget who got you your job at Fisher Corp." The man sighed and nodded, clearly uneasy. Julia waited for them to leave and quickly exited the hall. She needed to act fast. That same night, after the party ended and everyone had gone home, Julia returned to Thomas's office. Her hands shook as she wrote, "Urgent. Beware of enemies close by. Someone inside is sharing information with the competition. The Green Future Project is at risk. Check system access on Friday and keep an eye on David Chen. A betrayal is being planned by someone you might not expect. Trust only those who show loyalty through actions, not words. Your anonymous guardian. Julia folded the note carefully and placed it on the computer keyboard where Thomas would see it. As she left the office, her heart raced. This was about more than just business advice now. She was protecting the company and the man she had quietly begun to admire. The next day, Thomas found the most serious note he had ever received. The word urgent in big letters made him feel uneasy. He read it 3 times, studying each word. He knew David Chen. He was a good worker who never caused trouble, but the mysterious consultant had always been correct before. Thomas immediately called the head of security to set up careful monitoring of the IT system. If someone was planning an inside attack, he would be ready. As Thomas placed the note in the drawer with others, he whispered, "Whoever you are, you're helping me in ways you can't imagine." The search for the unknown consultant grew from a simple curiosity to something more important for the company's future. Down on a lower floor, Julia went about her evening routine, unaware that she had unknowingly become a protector of the Pfizer empire. Julia was cleaning the bathroom on the 15th floor when Sophie rushed in, breathless and holding her phone. "Julia, you need to see this right now!" she called out, completely forgetting they were supposed to be working. "Sophie, lower your voice. If the supervisor hears you, we could be in trouble," Julia replied quietly. But Sophie's intense look made her drop the cleaning cloth. "Forget the supervisor. Look at this," Sophie said, showing her the phone screen displaying a job ad. "Senior consultant at Fisher Corp. Starting salary, $85,000 a year, plus benefits. That's almost 4 times what you make here." Julia felt a knot in her stomach as she quickly scanned the ad, trying to act like it was the first time she saw it, even though she knew it by heart. "Sophie, this isn't for me. Look at the requirements," she explained. "MBA preferred, 5 years consulting experience, fluent in at least 2 languages. You speak Spanish and English perfectly, and you have a business degree from Columbia," Sophie argued, eyes wide. Julia sighed and sat down in a nearby chair. It was finally time to share the truth she had kept hidden for so long. "Sophie, do you know why I work here?" "Of course," said Sophie, but then she paused, realizing she had never really asked. "Actually, I don't know." Julia looked at her hands, still gloved. 5 years ago, I was in my last semester of college with great grades and an internship at a financial firm. My future looked bright, she recalled softly. Then my father had a heart attack. He died suddenly. Sophie sat next to her and gently touched her arm. "My mother fell into a deep depression. She stopped working and rarely left her bed. I had to decide finish college or take care of her." Julia fought back tears. "I quit 3 classes before graduating. Finding a job without a degree was tough. This job saved me." "But you went back to finish your degree, right?" Sophie asked. "I did. I took my last classes at night while working. I graduated 2 years ago, but I've never used my diploma," Julia replied with a sad smile. "Who would hire someone who dropped out and is now a cleaning lady?" Sophie paused, absorbing this new information. "Julia, you are the smartest person I know. Remember when you helped me with my budget or showed Jose how to handle his debts? You have a real talent for this." "This is different," Julia said. "Helping friends is one thing, but..." "But what?" Sophie interrupted, her voice firm. "Being successful with your skills is something to strive for. Julia Bennett, you are going to apply for that job, even if I have to write your application myself." Julia laughed, though emotions surged within her. "Even if I wanted to, look at me. I don't have interview clothes, an updated resume, or professional references." "Stop that," Sophie insisted. "You have a degree, intelligence, and I have a closet full of clothes I never wear." Sophie grabbed Julia's phone. "Let's do your application right now." "Sophie, no," Julia protested. "No excuses." "What's your email again?" Somehow, Julia found herself sharing the information with Sophie, who filled out the online form with a determined focus. "Work experience," Sophie said, typing. "I'll put down process optimization specialist at Eco & Services. That's true. You always find better ways to get things done. That seems a bit sneaky. It's clever and shows special skills. I'll add self-taught financial data analysis." Sophie kept typing. "That's true. You always make sense of those tricky charts in the newspapers." When Sophie clicked submit, Julia felt like she had taken a big leap. Done. Application sent. Sophie smiled proudly. "Now we wait. They'll never call me, Julia said quietly, but inside she felt both scared and hopeful. 2 days later, Julia almost dropped her bucket of water when an unknown number rang on her phone. Hello, Miss Bennett. This is Priscilla Walsh, Executive Secretary at Fisher Corp. Mr. Fisher wants to set up an interview for the senior consultant position. Julia stayed quiet for a few seconds. Miss, are you there? Yes, I'm here, Julia replied nervously. When would you be available? Would tomorrow at 2 o'clock work? Our office is on the top floor of Montgomery Tower. Julia looked around the hallway she was cleaning, the same one she would walk down the next day for her big interview. Perfect. He'll be there. Great. Bring an updated resume and be ready to talk about business growth strategies. Have a good day. When she hung up, Julia realized she was shaking. Sophie helped Julia over the next 24 hours like a true friend. She lent her an elegant navy blue suit, low-heeled shoes, and a nice purse. They even practiced answers to common interview questions. Remember, you're not a cleaner trying to be a consultant. You're a skilled professional returning to work, Sophie said for the 10th time while fixing Julia's hair. What if he recognizes me? You always wear a cap and uniform at night. Plus, people like Thomas Fisher don't even notice cleaning staff. Sad, but true. On the morning of the interview, Julia looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. The suit made her look confident and professional. Her hair framed her face beautifully. You can do this, she whispered to herself. At exactly 2 o'clock, Julia was at the reception on the top floor trying to calm her nerves. The place looked just as she remembered, but now everything felt different. Miss Bennett. Priscilla appeared with a friendly smile. Mr. Fisher will see you now. Julia followed Priscilla down the hallway to the office door where she had once hidden. She took a deep breath and walked in. Thomas Fisher was standing behind his desk, looking through some papers. When he looked up, Julia felt like time stopped for a moment. He looked even more impressive in person. He had perfectly combed brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a confident posture, just as she had imagined during her nights of observation. Miss Bennett, nice to meet you, Thomas said, reaching out his hand with a warm smile. Please have a seat. Julia shook his hand, relieved that she wasn't trembling. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Fisher. Thomas sat down and opened a folder with her resume. Collier University, Business Administration with a focus on corporate finance. Excellent grades, he said, clearly impressed. But I see a gap of a few years here. Can you explain? Julia was prepared for this question. I had to take a break for family reasons. My mother became ill, and I needed to care for her. During that time, I kept studying on my own and following the market. I understand. What made you decide to come back now? Honestly, I feel like I have a lot to offer. I've spent the last few years observing the corporate world from a different angle, and I believe that has given me unique insights into efficiency and process improvement. Thomas leaned forward, clearly interested. 1921. What kind of insights? Julia took a deep breath. It was now or never. For example, many companies focus on numbers but forget about the people who work for them. A happy and appreciated employee can do 30% more work than an unhappy one. Small changes in the office can save a lot of money. Interesting. 1940. Give me a practical example. Julia quickly thought of something she had noticed while working late. If a company is losing a lot of employees instead of just giving raises, why not check if the problem is communication between teams? Sometimes the answer is simpler than it seems. 1959. Thomas made some notes. What about ways to grow the business? How would you help a company that is struggling? Julia felt ready to answer. First, I'd find the main problems. The issue isn't always obvious. Then I'd look for ways to use what they already have in new ways. 2019. For instance, a traditional company could consider new markets or eco-friendly technologies without much upfront cost. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Do you know much about green markets? I've been following how that area is growing. 2038. It's a market that grows 23% each year and has a lot of potential for new ideas, Julia replied, remembering the research she'd done for the notes. Impressive, Thomas said, clearly surprised by how much she knew. They talked for another 40 minutes. Julia discussed market trends, marketing plans, resource use. and even mentioned some case studies she had seen, which were actually from soap operas. But he didn't need to know that. 2105. Miss Bennet, I have to say your answers were refreshing. Thomas finally said, you have a unique viewpoint that could be just what we need here. Julia's heart raced. Would you like to join our team? I really. Julia paused, momentarily forgetting to act professional. Thomas laughed. Of course. When can you start? Whenever you need me. How about Monday? Priscilla will handle all the paperwork. Welcome to Pfizer Corp. Consultant Bennett. 2131. When Julia left the office 20 minutes later, she still couldn't believe what had happened. She waited until she reached the ground floor to call Sophie. So? Sophie answered on the first ring. I got it, Julia whispered, still in shock. Sophie, I really got it. 2152. On the other end, Sophie shouted so loudly that Julia had to move the phone away from her ear. Walking through Manhattan streets, Julia felt her life had changed completely in just one afternoon. On Monday, she would start as a consultant at Fisher Corp. She would be in the same building, but in a completely different role, and Thomas Fisher had no clue he had just hired his own anonymous supporter. 2213. But deep down, he suspected Julia might be behind the notes. Monday arrived like a storm in Julia's life. At 8 a.m., she was on the 30th floor of Montgomery Tower, wearing Sophie's borrowed suit and trying to look confident as Priscilla led her through the hallways she knew well. Your office is here. 2237. Priscilla opened the door to a room with a view of the city. Mr. Fisher asked you to get familiar with the quarterly reports before the 10 o'clock meeting. Julia entered and acted like she was seeing the room for the first time. In fact, she had cleaned that very office the week before. Thank you, Priscilla. One question. Where's the women's restroom? At the end of the hall to the left, Priscilla replied, though she looked a little puzzled. 2303. You seem to know this building well for someone who hasn't worked here. Julia felt a chill. Oh, I came here a few times for meetings when I worked at my last company, she quickly said. This building is well known in the financial district. Priscilla seemed to accept what was said and left. Julia sank into the chair, her heart racing. She realized she had to be more cautious. In the first meeting, Julia surprised everyone by sharing an in-depth analysis about making resources work better, inspired by a soap opera called Lasciva Perfecta that she had watched with her mother. She explained that forming small teams could handle different tasks, showing the chart she had created. Each small team could tackle specific problems without getting bogged down in extra rules. Thomas watched her with great interest. Where did you come up with this? He asked. Julia replied vaguely that she had looked at international case studies. In Mexico, companies have used similar systems with great success. Fascinating. Please continue, he encouraged. Julia spent the week bringing new ideas that combined her academic background with strategies she had learned from years of watching business soap operas. She proposed marketing plans based on El Corazón de los Negocios and reorganizations inspired by Amore Corporativo. To her surprise, everything worked out well. The challenge was that Julia could not leave her night cleaning job. The consultant pay was great, but it took a month to begin. She needed the cleaning money to cover her mother's expenses and rent. At 7 p.m. on Wednesday, Julia was in the bathroom on the 20th floor changing. She packed her suit into her backpack and put on her eco-clean uniform. She tied her hair back, put on her cap, and became the invisible cleaner again. You're going to wear yourself out at this pace, Sophie said when they met in the supply closet. Just for a few more weeks, Julia whispered, until my first paycheck arrives. What if someone recognizes you? Sophie asked. Who would? Julia replied. During the day, I wear business clothes with my hair down and some makeup. At night, I'm in uniform and a cap. Besides, executives don't notice cleaners. Sophie shook her head, concerned. Just be careful. On Thursday, Thomas was looking over reports when he noticed something odd. The consultant's suggestions seemed strangely familiar, not the ideas, but the way they were presented. He took out a drawer where he kept anonymous notes and compared them to Julia's proposals. There were subtle similarities and interest in the human aspect, mentions of Latino culture, creative solutions that were different from the norm. Could it be? He whispered to himself. During the afternoon meeting, Thomas tested his theory. Julia, you've mentioned Mexican companies several times. Do you have experience with that market? Julia hesitated for a moment. My family is of Latino origin. I grew up learning about the business culture through documentaries and studies. Thomas saw her hesitation and became even more curious. On Friday night, Julia was cleaning Thomas's office when she heard the elevator. Panic rose within her. She looked at the clock. It was a little after midnight. He never came this late. She quickly put away her supplies and headed for the door, but then she heard footsteps coming closer. Desperate, she hid behind a bookcase, holding her breath. Thomas entered, speaking softly on the phone. Marcus, I need to check something. I have a theory about our mystery consultant. Julia felt her heart sink. Was he suspecting her? It might be just her nerves, but she noticed very clear similarities between the notes and the new consultant's proposals. Thomas continued. Both mention Latino references and follow the same innovative thinking style. Julia felt a sweat forming. Thomas moved to the desk and turned on the computer. I'll compare the handwriting on the notes with the ones from the meetings. Julia's heart raced as she hid, feeling sure that Thomas could hear it. Thomas spent a long time looking through papers and making notes. Interesting, he said quietly. After a while, he turned off the computer and got ready to leave. Julia tried to shift positions but accidentally knocked over an item on the shelf, making a loud noise. Who's there? Thomas called out, spinning around. Julia froze, hearing his footsteps come closer. In a panic, she ran the other way, trying to reach the door. Hey, stop right there! Thomas shouted. Julia hurried down the hall but stumbled, losing one of the small pearl earrings that Sophie had given her for her uniform. She quickly reached the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. Peering through the glass, she saw Thomas looking confused in the hallway. On Saturday morning, Thomas arrived early at the office. He found the pearl earring in the hallway and examined it closely. It was delicate and clearly did not belong to any of the night security guards. He called the cleaning company, asking for a list of female employees on the 30th floor. The supervisor replied, We have 3 in that department. Should I send the information? Yes, please. When Thomas received the list by email, he studied the names. Sophie Martinez, Maria Gonzalez, and Julia Bennett. He paused at Julia's name. This can't be a coincidence, he whispered, holding the earring. It was time to learn more about Julia. He placed the earring in a drawer with some anonymous notes. Everything was starting to make sense, and he sensed that Monday would be quite revealing. Meanwhile, Julia spent the weekend worried that Thomas had uncovered her secret and wondered about her job on Monday. The careful balance of her double life felt very uncertain. Victoria Sterling watched Pfizer Corp numbers with growing annoyance from her private office at Titanium Corp. Her plans to sabotage the company should have worked by now, but instead Pfizer Corp had the best results in years. How is this possible? She grumbled, looking through the financial reports she had received from David Chen. According to her intel, Thomas should have been struggling and desperate for help. Her plan was straightforward. Ruin the company from within, show up as the rescuer, and not only win Thomas back, but also take control of Fisher Corp. Instead, the company was unexpected thriving. Victoria picked up the phone and called someone. Marcus Blackwood Investigations. I need your help. Please investigate Fisher Corp new consultant Julia Bennett. I want to know everything about her. Meanwhile, Thomas watched Julia during the days, feeling both admiration and suspicion. In a meeting on Monday, he noted how well she knew where every department was. Julia, could you get the HR reports? He asked, trying her out. Sure. 15th floor, room 1507, right? She responded without a pause, then suddenly realized her mistake. I mean, if that's normally where HR is. Thomas looked at her intently. How do you know the room number? I walked by there yesterday and saw the sign, Julia replied, her voice shaky. Later, during lunch, Thomas observed how familiar Julia seemed with the office. She greeted some maintenance workers warmly, knew exactly where the water fountains were, and even recognized the security guard by name. I must be losing my mind, he thought to himself, or something very odd is happening here. On Tuesday, Thomas decided to run another check. During a meeting, he said, We need to fix the lights on the 12th floor. They're too dim. Julia replied without thinking. The 3 bulbs in the east hallway burned out last week. And the lights in the women's restroom need changing too. They're flickering. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Julia. How do you know that? Thomas asked with curiosity. Julia felt herself turn red. She had seen it when she walked by for a meeting with the marketing team, but Thomas knew that marketing was located on the 20th floor, not the 12th. On Wednesday, Victoria got the report she had been waiting for. Marcus Blackwood had done an excellent job. Interesting, she said over the phone while looking through the photos. Julia Bennett, a consultant by day and a cleaner by night. She smiled coldly, knowing she finally had what she needed to deal with the consultant who was getting in her way. That afternoon, she asked David Chen to find out when Julia was leaving work. It was time for a private talk. Julia was leaving Montgomery Tower at 6 p.m. when someone stopped her outside. Julia Bennett. She turned to see a well-dressed blonde woman wearing a nice coat and a smile that made her uneasy. It was Victoria Sterling. "Nice to finally meet you," Victoria said as she extended her hand in a friendly way. "Can we talk? It's about your job." Julia felt a sense of dread. "I don't know who you are, but I'm busy." "I know exactly who you are," Victoria responded, lowering her voice but keeping her smile. "I mean, I know who you are during the day and what you do at night." Julia felt a chill. "I don't know what you mean." "Night cleaner pretending to be a daytime consultant." "Please, dear." Victoria showed a photo on her phone of Julia leaving the building in her work uniform. "I have full proof of your double life." Julia glanced around, noticing the busy sidewalk, but no one was paying attention to their conversation. "What do you want?" "To talk. Let's walk." Victoria began to walk, and Julia felt she had no choice but to follow. "It'll be clear, Julia. You are complicating my plans." Victoria spoke quietly but firmly. "Thomas and I have a history, and your presence makes it harder." "What history?" Julia asked. "We were engaged, and will be again once I get some things sorted out." "You're one of those things." Julia felt anger rising. "I have nothing to do with your personal life." "You do. Thomas is too taken with you. This can't continue." Victoria faced her directly. "Here's my deal. You quit your consultant job tomorrow, or Thomas will find out the truth about you." "You can't do that." "I can and I will," Victoria replied, showing more photos on her phone. "I have you coming in as a cleaner, then leaving as an executive while talking to other staff members. I even have photos of you in his office last Friday." Julia felt overwhelmed. Victoria knew everything. "What do you want from me?" "For you to disappear. It's as simple as that." Victoria put her phone away. "Make an excuse, quit, and leave Thomas's life. In return, your secret stays safe." "And if I refuse?" Julia asked. Victoria laughed coldly. "Then tomorrow morning, Thomas will get an envelope with all these photos and a detailed letter explaining how you deceived him. I can only imagine how he'll feel when he learns he's been fooled." Julia clenched her fists. "You're cruel." "I'm just being practical." Thomas believed he should be with someone from his social circle, not someone like a cleaner trying to act like an executive. Victoria adjusted her purse and said, "You have until noon tomorrow to make a choice. Step down or get revealed. Think carefully." With that, she walked away, leaving Julia standing on the sidewalk, shaking with anger and worry. That night, Thomas worked late, trying to clear his head. He picked up a pearl earring he had found and looked at it closely. "Am I losing my mind?" he whispered. Could my consultant and the mysterious cleaner really be the same person? He recalled the signs, like her deep knowledge of the building, the familiar cultural references in her notes, and her reluctance to share details about her past. But if it was true, why would she keep it a secret? And would it affect the excellent work she was doing? Thomas set the earring in his drawer. Despite his doubts, Julia had changed the company for the better. Maybe it was time to talk to her openly and uncover the truth. Yet, he wanted to be certain first. Meanwhile, Julia spent the night wide awake, knowing she had less than 18 hours to make a tough choice: keep her job or guard her secret. Thomas wrestled with his thoughts about Julia all day, Each meeting seemed to support his theory. She understood the building like no one else and was aware of details only someone working there nightly would know. After Victoria's threat, he knew he had to discover the truth before it was too late. At 5 p.m., Thomas said he would leave early but instead hid in the executive restroom until he was sure everyone had gone. Then, he quietly returned to his office and positioned himself behind a bookcase, where he could watch the room without being noticed. If Julia was indeed the mysterious cleaner, she would come. At 10 p.m., Julia arrived at Montgomery Tower with a heavy heart. She had until noon the next day to make her decision: quit or risk being exposed by Victoria. She put on her Ecoan uniform, tied her hair back, and got her supplies. This could be her final night as a cleaner, and it oddly might be her last morning as a consultant, too. When she reached the 30th floor, Julia took a deep breath. That office had changed her life in many ways. It all started there with her secret notes. As she entered Thomas's office and began cleaning, she got lost in thoughts about how to explain her sudden choice to leave. "So, it really was you?" Julia froze at the calm voice behind the bookcase. The cleaning cart slipped from her hands and fell. She slowly turned to see Thomas step out of the shadows, and his face showed curiosity, not anger. "Mr. Fisher, I can explain," she stammered. "I'm sure you can," he replied as he moved closer but stayed respectful. "The question is, why didn't you tell me?" Julia felt tears welling up. "I knew I would lose everything: the job, your trust, my credibility." "Please sit down," Thomas said, pointing to the chairs by the window. "Let's have a real conversation." Julia took a moment, still shocked to be caught, but he added, "You don't need to be afraid. I want to understand." She sat on the edge of a chair, feeling anxious. Thomas settled into the chair across from her and waited. "Were you the one who left the notes?" Julia nodded quietly. "Why?" "Because I heard your conversation that first night. You looked worried and confused, and I wanted to help." She stumbled over her words. "It sounds odd, but I learned a lot about business watching soap operas with my mom, and I have a degree in business administration." "Your degree is real?" "Yes, it is." Julia then shared her entire story: her father's passing, her mother's sadness, how she had to pause her dreams to care for her family, and her later return to finish her studies that she never used. "I needed both jobs to pay my mom's bills and rent. The consultant salary is good, but it's been 30 days since I started." Thomas listened quietly, seeing her differently. "You saved my company twice," he finally said. "Once as an anonymous advisor and once as the official consultant. I didn't save anything. I just helped a little. Julia, in 6 weeks you changed Fisher Corp from a company in trouble to a market leader. That's not helping just a little." Thomas leaned forward. "Why were you so scared to tell me the truth?" "Because people like you don't hire people like me. I'm a cleaner, Mr. Fisher. I come from a poor family and live in a tiny apartment in Queens. My mom cleans houses when she feels well." Julia wiped her tears. "You're the CEO of a big company. We come from different worlds." "You think I care about that?" "You should. Your board of directors certainly does." Thomas paused, thinking about it. "What impresses me the most is your courage. Working 2 jobs, supporting your mother, and still managing to graduate despite everything. That takes a strength that few leaders I know have." Julia looked at him, surprised. "You don't see me as a fraud." "Fraud?" "Julia, you are the most genuine person I've ever met. Yes, you lied about your job, but you did it out of need and love for your family. That's not fraud. That's survival." They talked for hours. Thomas wanted to know about her education, her dreams, and how she learned about business by watching soap operas. Julia told him about studying late at night after work and how her mother inspired her even during tough times. "You're remarkable," Thomas said when the clock struck 2 in the morning. "Not for being a consultant or a cleaner, but for being you." Julia felt something shift between them. Their talk had broken down all professional walls. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you stop hiding. Stop being afraid of who you are." Thomas stood up. "And we keep working together to make Fisher Corp even better. As for your night job, when your first paycheck arrives, you can decide if you still need it. I won't make you choose." Julia stood too, feeling a heavy weight lift off her shoulders. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for saving me even when I didn't know it. They shared a moment in the quiet office, looking at each other with fresh understanding. Julia walked down the hall, feeling a mix of emotions. When she reached the conference room on the 25th floor, she found 5 men in suits gathered around a large table, all looking serious. Theodore Montgomery III, the chairman, stood at the head. Next to him, Victoria Sterling smiled, but her smile didn't seem sincere. "Miss Bennet, please sit," Theodore said coldly. Julia sat down with her heart racing. Thomas was not in the room. "We have received serious information about your job conduct," Theodore began, opening a folder. "Miss Sterling has evidence that you misled this company about your identity and qualifications." Victoria stood up, ready to share the evidence. "Gentlemen, as you can see from these photographs," she said, handing out copies of the images she had taken, "Miss Bennet works as a night cleaner in this building. She used this position to overhear confidential conversations and then pretended to be a qualified consultant." "That's not true," Julia spoke up. Julia protested. "I have a degree in business administration. My qualifications are real." Victoria smiled with a hint of malice. "Oh yes, the degree you got after years of working as a caretaker. And tell me, Miss Bennet, did you mention your night job during the interview?" Julia looked down. "No, I didn't mention it." "But you admit you didn't share everything," Theodore interrupted. "You used information you heard to pretend to be a business expert." "It wasn't like that. I heard a conversation by chance and wanted to offer help." "Help?" Victoria laughed mockingly. "Or did you just want to take an opportunity to be somewhere you shouldn't be?" Robert Chen, one of the senior directors, shook his head. "This is not right. A cleaning staff member acting as an executive consultant. What message does that send to our clients and investors?" "You made us look foolish," added Michael Rodriguez, another director. "Imagine if this gets out, we'll be the joke of Wall Street." Julia tried to defend herself. "My work speaks for itself. The results I've brought to the company are real, no matter what my night job is." "Results gained from unfair advantages," Victoria shot back. "You had access to confidential information. Anyone could come up with solutions with that kind of help." "Where is Mr. Fisher?" Julia asked desperately. "He knows my situation and supports my work." Theodore and the other directors exchanged looks. "Mr. Fisher is personally involved in this matter," Theodore said politely, "so the board will make this decision." At that moment, Thomas came into the room. "Sorry for being late. What is this meeting about?" Victoria's smile grew wider. "We were discussing Miss Bennet's situation, Thomas. Her true identity has been revealed." Thomas looked at Julia, who was clearly upset, then at the board. "Julia is an outstanding employee. Her work has transformed our company." "She's a cleaner who pretended to be a consultant," Theodore said firmly. "That's not acceptable." "She has a degree from Columbia University. Her qualifications are real," Robert Chen interrupted. "But she lied about her current job." Thomas tried to defend Julia. "Julia improved our processes, increased our efficiency by 40%, and created strategies that made us leaders in the market. Doesn't that matter?" "It matters, but it doesn't excuse dishonesty," Theodore replied. "Trust is essential in business, Thomas. How can we trust someone who was not honest from the start?" Victoria took this chance to speak up. "Thomas, I know it's hard to admit you were misled, but think about our company's reputation. Our investors won't accept knowing a cleaner had access to important information." "She's not just a cleaner," Thomas raised his voice, frustrated. "But that's her job at night while pretending to be an executive by day." Theodore concluded, "This is not acceptable." After a long discussion, the board reached a decision. "Miss Bennet," Theodore announced formally, "you are suspended while we investigate your actions. Depending on the results, this may lead to your termination." Julia felt tears coming to her eyes. "For how long?" "Until further notice. You may leave." Julia stood up straight, despite feeling humiliated. "Gentlemen, I'm sorry you see my background as a flaw, but I do not regret what I have done to help this company." She left the room with her head held high, but Thomas could see she was heartbroken. "This is a mistake," Thomas told the board after Julia left. "It's a necessary decision," Theodore replied. And Thomas, I recommend you stay out of this. Your judgment is clearly off. That night, Julia went back to her cleaning job, now only as an Ecoan worker. Sophie found her in the locker room, clearly upset. What happened? You seemed so happy this morning. Julia shared everything with her friend, and Sophie was angry. They can't do this. They can, and they did, Julia. Maybe I'm to blame. Maybe I aimed too high. Meanwhile, Thomas spent the night in his office collecting all the good things Julia had done for the company. Sales reports, efficiency studies, client feedback, everything showed she had changed Fisher Corp for the better. He called Marcus, his lawyer. I need help reversing an unfair board decision. An employee is being targeted because of their background. Thomas was determined to stand up for Julia, even if it cost him his job. 3 days after Julia's suspension, Fisher Corp faced its biggest challenge in years. Thomas was in an emergency meeting with the board when Marcus, his vice president, rushed in looking worried. Thomas, we need to talk now. Marcus, we're in a meeting. It's about the Meridian Industries contract. They canceled. The room fell silent. The Meridian contract was worth $50 million, making up 20% of the company's yearly income. How did they cancel? Asked Theodore Montgomery III, alarmed. Marcus handed out copies of an email to everyone at the table. We just received this an hour ago. They claim our proposal was compromised and that they found a similar offer from someone else. Thomas read the email, feeling uneasy. The message was clear. Someone had leaked private information to a competitor. Who had access to the details of this contract? He asked. Only the senior team. Marcus hesitated. And who else? David Chen from IT, and from... He set up the security system for the files. Thomas suddenly remembered the anonymous note from Julia warning him about David Chen. She had tried to inform him weeks before. Call David in for an urgent meeting, he ordered. 20 minutes later, David Chen was in the conference room looking nervous. Thomas got right to the point. David, I need you to be honest. Has anyone accessed the Meridian files without permission? David began to sweat. Not that I know of, sir. We have records of system access from your workstation outside of working hours last week. I sometimes work late. Thomas placed a recording on the table. Victoria had been careless during a call to David, which was picked up by security. David, do you know Victoria Sterling? The man started to break down. She claimed it was just public information that wouldn't hurt anyone. You shared confidential information with our competitor, Thomas said coldly. That's a serious offense. David confessed everything, how Victoria had pressured him, how he had shared details about several contracts, and how she wanted to harm Fisher Corp for personal reasons. After security took David away, Thomas was left in his office feeling desperate. The company was in trouble, and the one person who always found solutions wasn't there anymore. Julia had tried to warn him about this. At 9 p.m., Thomas drove to Queens, searching for the address from HR records. He found a modest apartment building and climbed to the 3rd floor. He knocked on apartment 3B. Julia opened the door, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair tied back in a ponytail. When she saw Thomas, her expression hardened. Mr. Fisher, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you. Please, we have nothing to discuss. You let the board treat me badly and didn't say anything. Julia, I tried to defend you. Tried? She laughed bitterly. You were there when they called me a dishonest opportunist and you didn't stand up for me. Thomas looked down. You're right, I let you down. But now I need your help. For what? The company is in trouble. Victoria messed up the Meridian contract. David Chen admitted everything. Without that contract, we'll have to let go of 300 workers. Julia stared at him for a while. And why is that my problem? According to the board, I'm just a deceptive cleaning lady. You're the only one who always finds answers when no one else can, Thomas said, his voice filled with worry. I need you. The company needs you. Those 300 families need you. Julia hesitated, seeing the honesty in his eyes. Come in, she finally said. The apartment was small but warm. Thomas noticed pictures of Julia with an older woman, her mom, and diplomas on the wall. My mom is resting, Julia explained quietly. She's not feeling well. They sat at the kitchen table while Thomas told her everything. Victoria's sabotage, the lost contract, the company's serious financial problems. Victoria planned it all perfectly, he concluded. She knows all our next moves. Julia was quiet for a few minutes, thinking about what he said. Are you sure she's sharing information with Titanium Corp? Absolutely. David confirmed it. Julia stood up and went to a shelf full of soap opera DVDs. Remember the show Loving Ganza Perfecta? No. The main character learned her ex-husband was trying to destroy her company. She pretended to give up everything but was actually setting a trap. Julia grabbed a DVD and showed him the cover. She made him think he'd won only to reveal all his wrongdoings. Thomas frowned. What are you saying? That we can use Victoria's overconfidence against her? Julia said, getting excited as her strategic mind kicked in. She thinks she's already won. Let's make her think you're desperate and willing to do anything. How? Julia explained a careful plan. Thomas would act like he was willing to sell part of the company to Victoria in exchange for saving Fisher Corp. During talks, they'd record Victoria admitting her wrongdoings. But for that, we need strong proof she stole information, and we must get the Meridian contract back. How will we do that? Julia smiled for the first time that night. Remember that episode of El Imperio de los Senos? The main character showed her competitors stole her ideas by proving they didn't really understand the project they copied. Thomas began to understand. You want us to create a complex presentation so only someone who truly developed it can answer the questions? Exactly. And we'll do it tomorrow in front of the Meridian executives. They spent the night working on the plan. Julia based her recovery strategy on 3 different soap operas, but used her real business knowledge to make it practical. When the sun rose, they had a solid plan, not only to save the company, but also to expose Victoria. Julia, Thomas said as she walked him to the door, thank you for helping me, even after everything. I'm not doing this for you, she replied. I'm doing it for the 300 families who might lose their jobs because of one woman's personal revenge. Thomas nodded, understanding. When this is all over, I'll make sure the board sees your worth. First, we save the company, Julia said. Then we'll think about the rest. But inside, she knew that even if she saved Fisher Corp again, she might never get her position back. The next morning, Thomas arrived at the office at 6 a.m. to put their plan into action. First, he needed to set the stage for the trap to expose Victoria. He called Marcus. Arrange an emergency meeting with the Meridian executives for today at 2 p.m. Tell them we have a last-minute proposal that could save the contract. Thomas replied, They already canceled. Why would they come back? Because we're offering something the competition can't, a unique solution only we can provide. At 10 a.m., Julia quietly entered through the service entrance. Sophie had helped her create a simple disguise with sunglasses, a cap, and casual clothes. She went straight to Thomas's office. Is everything ready? She asked. The meeting with Meridian is set, and Victoria took the bait. Thomas showed a message on his phone. She'll be here at 3 to discuss a partnership that could save Fisher Corp. Julia smiled. The first part of the plan is working, along with the recording system. Marcus had installed equipment in both rooms. Everything said would be recorded. They spent the next hours perfecting the presentation for Meridian. Julia had created a thorough and detailed implementation strategy that only someone who really understood the original project could answer specific questions about. If Titanium Corp really took our project, Julia explained, they'll only have basic information. They won't be able to explain the technical details. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the executives from Meridian Industries arrived. CEO Jonathan Walsh, COO Sarah Chen, and technical consultant Robert Martinez were present. Gentlemen, Thomas began the presentation, I know you canceled the contract with us, but we would like to offer a completely new approach. Julia, identified only as an implementation specialist, started her presentation. She described a logistics optimization system based on predictive analysis and real-time data integration. Our method uses adaptive algorithms that adjust to Meridian's specific seasonal variations, Julia explained while showcasing complex charts. This results in a 23% savings in operating costs during the first year. Jonathan Walsh leaned forward, interested. Titanium Corp offered us something similar, but not with this level of detail. How did you come up with these numbers? Julia smiled inwardly. It was the question she expected. We based our analysis on 3 unique Meridian factors. Your seasonal distribution pattern, the specific geography of your distribution centers, and employee turnover rates. These factors create a custom algorithm that no competitor can replicate without access to this inside data. Sarah Chen asked several highly technical questions, and Julia answered them all precisely, showing her deep understanding of both the project and Meridian Industries itself. "Impressive," muttered Robert Martinez. "Titanium's proposal didn't have even half this detail because they only copied the surface," Thomas said. "They didn't have access to the real project development." After 2 hours of presentation and questions, Jonathan Walsh concluded, "It's clear you've developed an innovative solution. Titanium gave us a simplified version which we now see is just a poor copy. We want to reactivate our contract with Fisher Corp." At 3:15, Victoria Sterling arrived at Thomas's office, looking confident and polished. "Thomas, dear, I heard things aren't going well," she said with feigned sympathy. "Maybe it's time to consider my help." "Victoria, I have to admit you were right. The situation is critical," Thomas replied. "I warned you about your consultant," she said. "But don't worry, we can fix this together." Victoria sat down with satisfaction. "I'm ready to invest in Fisher Corp and help it get back on track." "What kind of investment?" Thomas asked. "I'll buy 40% of the company at a fair price. In return, I will bring my expertise and contacts to recover the lost contracts." Thomas pretended to think about the offer. "How can I be sure you can really help us?" Victoria couldn't help but boast. "Thomas, I planned this whole situation. Those contracts you lost were part of my plan. David Chen has been working with me for months. I know all your next moves. You damaged my company. I took something that should have been mine since we got engaged." Victoria stood tall. "But now I can fix everything. I already have the contracts with Meridian and Peterson Industries signed with Titanium. I can transfer them back to you for a fee." Thomas rose, too. "And if I say no, then Fisher Corp will struggle in 6 months. I'm sure of it because I set that plan in motion myself." Victoria smiled with a hint of menace. "Choose, Thomas. Accept my offer or lose everything." At that moment, Marcus entered with 2 FBI agents. "Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest for corporate sabotage and extortion," the lead agent announced. Victoria's face went pale. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything." Thomas picked up a recorder from the desk. "Actually, we just recorded your confession." As Victoria was taken away, the story broke in the media. People quickly started talking about the vengeful ex-fiancée who tried to ruin a company out of jealousy. The real twist came when it was revealed how a cleaning lady discovered the sabotage and saved the company twice. The hashtag #CleaningLadyGenius began to trend, and journalists rushed to interview Julia. The story of the woman who cleaned offices at night and saved companies by day spread across the country. The next day, Thomas called an emergency board meeting. "Gentlemen," he began, placing documents on the table, "I need to talk about Julia Bennett." Theodore Montgomery III sighed. "Thomas, we've already made our decision about the cleaning lady." "The cleaning lady who saved our company twice," Thomas interrupted. "And now she's recognized as a business genius." He shared impressive numbers. There was a 47% increase in efficiency, 32% growth in sales, a 28% drop in costs, and we recovered contracts worth $70 million. Plus, the good news on social media raised our stock by 15% just today. Robert Chen looked over the numbers and smiled. "These results are extraordinary." "These are Julia Bennett's results," Thomas said firmly. "The woman you suspended because of bias." Michael Rodriguez shook his head. "Even with these results, she still didn't share all her information during hiring. She left out one detail because she was worried you'd judge her." Thomas stood up. "Gentlemen, we have 2 choices. We can either recognize Julia's talent and promote her, or explain to the press why we fired the woman who saved our company." The silence in the room said a lot. Theodore sighed deeply. "All right, Thomas. What's your proposal?" The boardroom was quiet as Thomas explained his plan. Theodore looked at the papers, then at the other directors. "Are you suggesting we promote someone who didn't share crucial information during the hiring process?" "I'm suggesting we recognize the talent of someone who saved our company twice and is now known as a business genius," Thomas replied firmly. Robert Chen flipped through the financial reports. "The numbers don't lie. A 47% increase in efficiency, 32% growth in sales. And don't forget about the stock rise, Marcus added. 15% in one day. Investors love the story of the genius cleaning lady. Michael Rodriguez sighed. Still, it sets a risky example. If we promote someone who was not completely honest in the interview, she didn't lie about her qualifications, Thomas interrupted. She has a business degree from Columbia. Her strategies are based on real knowledge. She just didn't mention that she worked as a cleaner at night to make ends meet. I want to start a new department called the Innovation Directorate, focusing on creative business solutions and unique process improvement. Julia would be the director. Director? Robert Chen raised an eyebrow. That's quite a big step. Based on strong results, Thomas responded. Plus, we need to take advantage of the positive media attention. Julia Bennett has become a symbol of overcoming challenges and innovation. Letting her go would be a public relations disaster. The directors exchanged looks. Marcus showed his tablet. Look at this. Fisher Corp, the company that sees talent where others see only workers. That's the headline in today's Wall Street Journal. Then Marcus flipped the screen. How a cleaner changed a multinational company. Lessons in inclusive leadership. Harvard Business Review wants to do a case study on us. Theodore sighed deeply. All right, but with conditions. A 6-month probation period, direct supervision, and open information about her current situation. Thomas smiled. I accept all conditions. An hour later, Thomas stood outside Julia's apartment in Queens. When she opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept much. Thomas, what are you doing here? I came with good news. Can I come in? Julia led him into the living room where her mother was watching TV. Mom, this is Thomas Fisher, my former boss. Mrs. Alina Bennett smiled warmly. Oh, the famous CEO. Julia talks a lot about you. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Bennett. Call me Elena. Want some coffee? I just made some. While Elena prepared the coffee, Thomas and Julia sat on the sofa. So, what's the good news? The board just approved your reinstatement with a promotion. Julia's eyes widened. Promotion? Innovation Director? A new department focused on creative business solutions, a salary of $120,000 a year plus benefits. Julia was quiet for a moment, taking in the news. Director, me? You deserve it, Julia. More than deserve it. Elena came back with the coffee, noticing the excitement. Did something good happen? Mom, Julia said, still amazed. They offered me a promotion to director. Elena shouted with joy and hugged her daughter. My girl, I always knew you'd go far. After Elena went to rest, Thomas and Julia stayed alone on the apartment balcony, watching the streets of Queens below. Thank you, Julia said softly, for believing in me when no one else did. No need to thank me. You showed your worth by yourself. They enjoyed a comfortable silence for a few minutes. Julia, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Why did you take the risk of leaving those anonymous notes? You could have just done your cleaning job and left it at that. Julia smiled sadly. Because I saw you that night, so worried and lost. I thought I could help. I just couldn't ignore it, even knowing it might cause problems for me. My mother always taught me to help others when I can, no matter the risks. Thomas looked at her with new understanding. Julia, I need to tell you something. What? During all these weeks working with you and getting to know who you really are, I fell in love. Julia felt her heart race. Thomas, not just because you are a smart consultant or a hardworking woman. I fell in love with you for your intelligence, determination, and kindness. But we come from different worlds. We come from worlds that complete each other. Thomas moved closer. You taught me that true worth isn't about how high you are on the social ladder. It's about who you are inside. He lightly touched her face. Can I kiss you? Julia nodded. When their lips met, she felt all her struggles were worth it. After they kissed, Julia rested her head on Thomas's shoulder. There's something I need to tell you about my new job, she said. What is it? He asked. I'm going to keep my night job. Thomas stepped back, looking surprised. Why? You can support yourself well with your new salary. It's not about the money, Julia explained. It's about my identity. I don't want to forget where I came from. I want to stay connected to the people who truly keep the company going. You want to work 16 hours a day? Thomas asked. I want to work a few nights a week to remind myself that every choice I make as a director affects real people with real dreams and needs. Thomas kissed her again. That's why I love you. You always remember what really matters. And you don't mind dating a director who also works a night job? Not at all. You're the most amazing woman I've ever met. They both laughed as they watched the city lights flicker in the distance. You know what the best part of all this is? Julia asked. What's that? Tomorrow, he'll be able to help others like me. Talented people who just need a chance. Thomas smiled, realizing he had found not only the love of his life, but also the right partner to make Pfizer Corp into something much more than just a business. 6 months after becoming the innovation director, Julia was in her new office on the 28th floor, working on her biggest project yet, the Hidden Talents program. Sophie, I need your help, she said to her friend, who was now her special assistant. Sure, what do you need? Julia pointed to a stack of papers on her desk. I want to find employees in regular roles who have the potential to grow. People like me, who might have skills no one knows about yet. Sophie smiled. Like a treasure hunt for talent. Exactly. We'll start with cleaning, maintenance, security, and other support workers. Julia created an evaluation system that went beyond traditional resumes, including informal talks, practical tests, and observing daily work. The first person she looked at was Carlos Martinez, a night security guard who always made detailed notes about little problems he found during his rounds. Carlos, I saw your notes on energy use on the upper floors, Julia said during their chat. How did you learn that? I study engineering at night, Miss Bennett. I'm not finished yet, but I enjoy applying what I learn at work. What if I offered you a role in facilities management? Carlos's eyes lit up. Would that be possible? With the Hidden Talents program, anything is possible. In 3 months, Julia found 12 employees with amazing potential. There was a cleaning staff member who spoke 4 languages, a doorman with an MBA who lost his job during a crisis and could now go back to finance, and a cafeteria worker who developed her own efficient inventory system. News of the program got out when Sarah Kim, a former cleaning lady turned marketing analyst, created an ad campaign that raised sales by 28% in the first quarter. Pfizer Corp finds talent where others see only workers. Thomas read from a business article to Julia. You're starting a revolution. I'm just doing what someone did for me, Julia said, although she knew deep down that she was changing lives. Social media buzzed with inspiring stories, and hidden talents became a trending topic worldwide. Employees from companies around the world began sharing stories about their hidden talents. The big change happened when Thomas suggested they create a formal method based on Julia's unique way of doing things. Your strategies are effective, but we need to organize them so other companies can use them, he said in a meeting. What do you mean? A management method, something we can teach and share, Julia replied. Julia had an idea. What if we create something focused on storytelling? I've used soap opera stories for years to explain difficult concepts. Thomas got excited. You could turn that into a training program. Over the next few weeks, Julia worked hard on a method she called Clean Business, which used simple and relatable stories to teach complicated management ideas. The first module was about leadership through characters, using soap opera stories to explain different leadership styles. Take Ricardo Dominguez from The Perfect Boss, Julia told a room full of business leaders. He starts as a tough leader, but learns that true leadership comes from trust. The executives listened carefully. The stories made complex ideas clear and memorable. The second module focused on conflict resolution using storylines. It showed how soap opera characters deal with tricky disagreements. For example, when 2 family companies fight over an inheritance, the solution is a merger that helps both, showing us about finding win-win solutions in business conflicts. Within 6 months, the clean business method was being tested in 5 partner companies with impressive results. A 35% improvement in employee retention, a 42% increase in job satisfaction, and a 29% rise in productivity. Harvard Business School invited Julia to speak about innovation through stories, and Stanford created a case study on Pfizer Corp. MIT wanted to explore how simple stories could help explain complex management ideas. Julia, do you see what's happening? Thomas said one evening while they were dining at their favorite restaurant in Brooklyn. What? Julia replied. You didn't just save a company. You're changing how the business world thinks about talent and leadership. Julia smiled, but then her expression turned serious. Sometimes I still can't believe it. A year ago, I was just cleaning offices and watching soap operas with my mom. Now I'm one of the most recognized executives in New York. Thomas asked, What are you most proud of? Julia said, The letters I receive. People from around the world tell me my story has inspired them to keep pursuing their dreams. Thomas took her hand. You deserve all the praise. It's not just about me. It's about showing that talent is everywhere. We just need to find it. 9 months after starting the Hidden Talents program, Pfizer Corp became one of the most desirable companies to work for in New York, with over 200 companies on the waiting list for the Clean Business program. Julia also created a nonprofit foundation to help small businesses that couldn't afford expensive consulting. Every month, she volunteered a few nights at shelters and community organizations. Why do you still do that? Thomas asked, as he watched her prepare for a night of volunteering. Because I can't forget that there are thousands of people like me out there waiting for a chance. Thomas kissed her and said, That's why I love you more every day. 1 year after launching the Hidden Talents program, Julia stood on the stage of the Grand Ballroom at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, receiving the Executive of the Year award from the National Business Leadership Association. It's a pleasure to be here today, she said into the microphone, holding the golden trophy. But this award isn't just for me. It belongs to all the Pfizer Corp workers who show that talent does not depend on background or uniform. The crowd of 500 executives stood and cheered. In the front row, Thomas watched with pride next to Elena Bennett, who was crying with joy, seeing her daughter shine on stage. 2 years ago, I was cleaning this very hotel at night, Julia continued. I dreamed of being on the other side as a guest. I never imagined I would be here as an honoree. The cameras from CNN and Bloomberg captured every word. Julia's story had touched many people around the world. I want to dedicate this award to all the workers who do jobs society often overlooks, but who actually keep our economy running. You may not always be seen, but you are important. The applause was thunderous, and I especially want to thank Thomas Pfizer, CEO of Pfizer Corp., who had the courage to see that anyone can be a leader, no matter their background. Julia paused, looking for Thomas in the crowd. Thomas, you changed my life by believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. That's when Thomas stood up from his table and walked toward the stage. Julia looked confused for a moment. Thomas, what are you doing? He climbed up to the stage, took another microphone, and stood beside her. Julia Bennett, he said, his voice echoing in the hall. You cleared out everything that didn't matter in my life and filled it with real love. The audience murmured, sensing something special was happening. Thomas knelt on the stage and pulled out a small velvet box. You taught me that a person's worth isn't about what they do, but who they are. Will you marry me? Julia covered her face with her hands, tears flowing down her cheeks. I want everyone to know I love the most amazing woman I've ever met, he said, opening the box to show a simple, elegant ring. Julia, will you be my wife? Yes, she exclaimed without a second thought. Yes, I will. The grand ballroom erupted in applause and cheers. Cameras flashed continuously. Elena Bennett wept with joy in the front row, comforted by Sophie. Thomas slipped the ring onto Julia's finger and shared a sweet kiss on stage as 500 executives celebrated this beautiful moment at an awards ceremony. 6 months later, Central Park looked magical for Julia and Thomas's wedding. They chose Bow Bridge, with a view of the lake and the Manhattan skyline behind them. Julia wore a simple white dress that was elegant without being too fancy, making her look like a princess. Thomas looked sharp in a classic tuxedo, but his eyes sparkled brighter than anything else. Dear friends, said the officiant, we are gathered here not only to celebrate the union of Julia and Thomas, but also a love story that shows us all that love knows no barriers. In the audience were Pfizer Corp employees, from executives to the cleaning staff. Carlos Martinez, now facility supervisor, sat in the front row next to Sarah Kim, who had become marketing director. "Thomas," Julia said during the vows she had written, "you taught me that dreams don't fade, that it's never too late to start anew, to believe, to love." Thomas replied, "You showed me that real leadership comes from having the courage to do what is right. I promise to support you always in any challenges we choose to face together." When the officiant declared them husband and wife, the pigeons in the park seemed to celebrate too, flying in circles above the couple as they shared a joyful kiss. 3 months after her wedding, Julia sat at her desk in the office, now a vice president of innovation at Pfizer Corp., when she received a call that would change her life again. "Hello, Julia. This is Amanda Richardson from Random House Publishing. Your literary agent sent us your book manuscript. We're interested in publishing it." Julia held the phone tightly. "You want to publish my book?" "Yes. From cleaning lady to executive, your story is just the kind of inspiration people need right now." "Do you really think it will sell?" Amanda laughed. "Julia, we already have pre-orders from 15 different countries. We believe it will be an international bestseller." After they hung up, Julia placed her hand on her belly, where a small life had been growing for 3 months. "Did you hear that, baby?" she whispered. "Your mommy is going to be a famous author." Thomas appeared in the office doorway. "Who are you talking to?" "To our baby, telling her she will be born into a world where people know genius can come from anywhere." Thomas kissed her and gently placed his hand over her belly, knowing their daughter would understand that her mother changed the corporate world forever. A year later, Julia appeared on the Today Show to promote her book, which had spent 50 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. The host asked, "What is the main lesson you want people to take from your story?" "That talent doesn't have an address, a last name, or a social class," Julia replied, holding her 6-month-old daughter. "If we give the right people opportunities, they will surprise the world." Pfizer Corp had become a global leader in corporate inclusion. Companies around the world sent executives to learn the clean business methods Julia had helped create. The Hidden Talents program was now in over 200 companies in 40 countries. "And what comes next?" the host asked. Julia glanced at Thomas, who was smiling proudly in the audience. "We will keep showing that when we give people a chance to shine, they can change their own lives and the world." Thomas stood up, walked over to Julia, hugged her, and kissed her. What do you think of Julia and Thomas's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to follow all our stories.